Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our post-holidays episode of the Music Works. And we have Katie Beardsworth joining us from the UK. And Katie brings back her wonderful guests for the Music Works. Welcome, Katie. So great to see you back.
Lovely to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. We had quite adventurous holidays
Yes, yeah.
for both of our countries, right?
Absolutely.
But
It's been a shaky start to 2021, I think.
Yep, but we're keeping on and continuing to bring our viewers the programs which we prepared and looking forward to starting season 2. That's exciting. But let's first things first. Please introduce this episode we're about to see.
So today we are going to see the episode I recorded with Rafaelo Morales, who runs the Fidelio Orchestra Cafe in London. The Fidelio Orchestra Cafe was one of the first, or possibly the first, venue to reopen with live music in the UK back in July, when the lockdown restrictions in this country eased enough to be able to hold events. And he does an absolutely astounding job of bringing really exquisite musicians into a cafe setting and with beautiful food and drinks and creates wonderful events. He also runs the Fidelio Orchestra, and so in this episode we talk about the classical music industry and the ways in which the impacts of COVID really need to lead to a better place for the industry.
Wonderful. Every one of your guests, Katie, are bringing so much insight into what can be done better. And, musicians have a great impact on how things can run better. And when we put our hands together, it's a better space for everyone. It's a better workspace for musicians. It's a better experience for our audience, and it's much more connection. And I just admire your guests who are not shying away from experimenting and not afraid to make mistakes, then correct mistakes, and then always shape their programs in wonderful, brilliant, unique ways. This is just extraordinary wealth of information and experience which they share. Now, give us a little peek preview on what's coming.
Well, on these broadcasts, we've been rebroadcasting Series 1. We've nearly finished that now. We've got today's episode and then another episode on Thursday in which I talked to Naomi Pohl of the Musicians Union and Julia Rowan of the Ivors Academy Guild for Composers and Songwriters about the fixed streaming campaign, which is an absolutely vital step for the music industry. They're both involved heavily in this campaign, which is a select committee inquiry run by the government, looking into the way streaming royalties are distributed amongst musicians, songwriters, and the other parties involved in creating the music. And it's a very, very enlightening and interesting and current inquiry. So do tune into that on Thursday. Yeah, it's
very much so. I'd like to encourage people to watch that episode because, searching internet and doing all this Google search, how do I monetize my content? How do I protect my copyrights? Can take endless amount of time, and half of that information is not even reliable. Now you'll hear from the people who had done the footwork, had put enormous amount of effort, expertise, and time into actually finding the right answers and the answers which really work. That is an extraordinary episode. And after that,
absolutely. And after that, we start season 2.
Yes.
Which is very exciting. So in season 2, we have a whole raft of interesting guests coming. We will have episodes on fundraising. We will have an episode with SWAPRA, which is for anyone that doesn't know, it's the campaign for parents working in the classical music industry, particularly the opera industry, and quality and good working conditions for parents. We continue to speak to leading musicians about what their careers are like at the moment, the impact of COVID, yes, but also what the future holds. And if I can just say that, I'm not sure, Anna, if you're aware of this, but in the UK, yesterday or the day before, the news broke that it appears from the current headlines that our government has actively blocked a offer from the European Union for musicians to have an open access sort of arrangement where they don't need a visa to work in the EU, as we obviously in the UK are no longer a part of the EU. And to have this blocked by our government at a time when we are already suffering from the lack of investment and understanding of what the industry needs and how the industry is suffering from COVID is a real blow. I'm personally very upset about it. I know that a lot of people are. I remain hopeful that it may change, and there is a campaign and a petition to change it, but I just wanted to say that it has really strengthened my resolve that this is absolutely critical that we are having these discussions about the future of the industry at this time, because, you know, at a time when it feels like things are really against us, I think it's important for you as musicians to know that yes, there are lots of difficult there are lots of people who do appear to be against us, or certainly movements that don't help, but that we are here to help and to have these discussions and to bring you the content that hopefully is helpful at the moment.
Absolutely. This is a very fresh news. I haven't seen those headlines yet. So maybe for the Thursday episode, we will prepare some concise information and share just before we air the next episode on Thursday. So please stay with us on Thursday at the same time, 8:30 a.m. for the US, which is 1:30 p.m. for the UK. And we're ready now to present episode with Rafael Morales. And I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learn a lot. And you can rely on the information shared on those episodes. It is shared with open heart by people who actually did test every one of the advices which they share with you.
Hello and welcome to Music Works, a podcast by Polyphony Arts. We're talking about the future of the classical music industry with some great guests. Thank you for joining us. Hello and welcome back to Music Works. I'm Katie Beardsworth and today we're joined by Rafaela Morales. Hello, welcome. Hi. Thank you so much for joining me. Raffaello is the musical director of the Fidelio Orchestra and the owner of the Fidelio Cafe in London. And Raffaello, perhaps you could tell us more about what you've been doing over the last few months.
Yes, hi Katie, hi everyone. Yes, I'm the music director of the Fidelio Orchestra. Over the past few months, as you know, not a lot of orchestra activities were in fact able to take place. We've been concentrating on supporting the chamber music life in London and partnering with musicians, both London-based and traveling from abroad. We've been able to offer some truly exceptional moments to a lot of people here in London, and in fact beyond. There's people who travel to our events from Hertfordshire, from Devon, from Dorset, from all the country, in order to enjoy, from the Isle of Man, I should say. Fantastic. In order to enjoy some quality music and food here at the Fidelio Orchestra Cafe.
Wonderful. And the cafe was one of the first places to reopen and hold live music again over the summer. Right?
Yes. We are told that we were the first place to restart live music with an audience on the 7th of July.
Fabulous. Well, congratulations. Yeah. How was that?
Well, it was somehow, as Stephen Isserlis put it, it was a little bit like coming back home after a long absence, and without going into much detail about what you've been doing away from home in all those months, it really felt like finally getting back together, and I mean we've had. I think that moment, as well as the last concert we had on the 4th of November, just before the second lockdown was put into place with Imogen Cooper, those are really moments that will stay, I think, with us, and will stay with them, of course, with the artists, and with everybody who was involved, because you really understand the power of this connection between people that this music can bring about. Um, um, and of course, Bach cello suites back in July, and Beethoven's Diabelli variations in November, just a couple of weeks ago. Again, it's this music that somehow is above history, because it permeates it in all directions, and creates bonds across cultures, across generations, across historical times, across cultures, and that's what I think will stay with people. The resilient power of music to give a reason to continue to fight on for what is valuable. Well, yeah, I mean, of course, I think there's a, I mean, there's a big problem of these days of really understanding what the role of everything we're doing as artists in society, what the role is, and I think there has been a lot of worry about trying to get things back to where they used to be. Without even stopping for a moment to try and understand how sort of suboptimal the whole system used to run, in what suboptimal way the system used to run. So, I mean, why our main tenets are that, of course, of establishing sort of humanly worthwhile relationships with artists and audiences alike, and coming together around music and around other things that we consider worthwhile, and support them whatever it takes. Of course, we were somehow pioneers back in the summer to get things back on track, even in in an environment where a lot of people were convinced that things couldn't actually happen. And I can tell you that we had over 2,000 people coming to our events between July and October, and not a single COVID case.
That's fantastic.
So, and I mean, it's just the I think until we think, or we assume that the guidelines that we're given are actually conducive to a low risk environment, until then, I don't think much will be able to happen that is somehow stimulating and is somehow interesting. Because I mean, I think by now it's obvious that we're ruled by a completely incompetent class. So I mean, as long as we don't make ourselves sort of legally prosecutable, I think everything is allowed, and everything should be allowed, and people should really take risk rather than just locking in and say, no, I don't want to come across as if I'm pushing it too far. I mean, what is art if not pushing the boundaries, right?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think for a lot of us, there's been a toss up between a sense of genuine safety and a sense of complying to the guidelines, and that those two things haven't always been exactly the same.
Aligned, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly. I know, because I planned a festival day of 5 events in one day, all with different, audiences, and it was a huge exercise in, sanitizing things that had been touched in between and all that kind of thing, and ventilating appropriately. And I think those things felt really necessary and important, and I would never have dreamed of not doing them because they felt essential. But not holding the event didn't feel at all essential. If it felt the other way around, it felt like we had to hold it because if we could, and if it was legal to do so, because we felt confident that we were able to implement the guidelines in a way that was safe and could provide an artistic experience.
Absolutely. There's all this fuss about complying with the guidelines, and as if having a bottle of sanitizer on a table would change substantially, the risk you're taking in going out and meeting somebody else. I would say that there is a fact, and the fact is that this virus is, of course, lethal, and that it does kill. So we're not trying to downplay its it's danger to our standard ways of living, but there's also a fact that we have shown how vulnerable our societies are to unexpected events, and I think that in this environment and in this context, investing in creative activities, in creative endeavors, in a way is the solution to make sure that societies can become more resilient. Because at the end of the day, I think every artistic endeavor is somehow a very well struck balance between individuality and community, between singular and universal, and that's what we're really showing that we're missing nowadays. We're missing the key connection between the individual member of society and the universal community of human beings, and everybody is is locked in a home because they're really worried about their own health, but there has been no real sort of concerted effort at safeguarding, at salvaging what should be the key endeavors at a social level that allow a society to function and to thrive and to prosper and to look ahead to the future. So I think this coordinated effort being absent from a government point of view, organizations just need to take responsibility and understand that we do have a duty to keep things going and to motivate and to give hope and to create social value somehow, where those in charge or allegedly in charge are clearly failing. And I mean, there's little pride. I must admit. People say, "Are you not proud?" I mean, there's no pride in this. There's just a sense of exhaustion at at realizing how obvious certain things are and how rare at the same time they are, and it's a bit disappointing, to be honest, to see that after 6 months of efforts to try and make things go again, and re-embolden the public to trust the public spaces and the community efforts and so on. And then we get this massive U-turn that is completely incoherent with anything that has been enforced since July on, really. And what is the confidence going to be going forward? Because even once we are reopened in December, if God forbid, what is the confidence going to be like? I mean, of not being shut again, because yes, we're doing everything possible to bring business back into function, but unfortunately the R number is above 1.9. I mean, it's just unacceptable.
Well, there's sort of, oh gosh, there's so much in what you've just said, but to me there's always felt like something about, I feel a lot of us who really want to do things for our audiences, for our artists, for ourselves, we're desperate to find a way, but I often find myself curtailing that momentarily every now and then and thinking, but is it safe? Am I being irresponsible? And so on and so forth. And I think that the fact is that the government and the way the guidelines work is it's blurred the lines between personal responsibility and organisational responsibility, in my opinion. So I think that we could, people. So, and what I mean by that specifically is that meeting people in your own home is supposed to be the most dangerous thing you can do, and that I understand that one of the big reasons that is given for that is that we're more relaxed in our homes or in people's homes, and we don't, we can't regulate, you can regulate business owners and say you have to have hand sanitizer and you have to have signs up and you have to have a QR code and so on and so forth. You can't regulate what people do in their homes. But I think that what that means is that the one thing that people do that is kind of unregulated and relaxing is not allowed. And then when you go and do things in business places that is, depending on the state of lockdown or restrictions, is allowed, it's then the onus is very much on the owner or the provider of that to create that kind of atmosphere. I've been to places where I've not felt safe because they've had all the right signage up and everything, but it's just too small and there's too many people in there and you don't feel like it's possible to do that. And I've been to places where it's been almost the other way. The proprietors have been so incredibly worried, probably about the police coming around and discovering them and getting a fine. Not that they were doing anything wrong, but just that the level of control is so overbearing at times that they've been terribly worried. I was in a pub over the late summer at 10 to 10, and the landlady was doing everything in her power to get everyone out by 10, which is difficult because people don't want to go, and obviously pub kicking out time is usually quite a protracted affair under usual circumstances. And I really felt for this woman because she was absolutely just terrified that somebody was going to walk around the corner at 2 minutes past 10 and slap a fine. The whole thing is just very stress-inducing, I think, for everyone involved. And I feel like it's my responsibility.
We had the same issue, absolutely.
I feel like it's my responsibility to provide something where people can come in and feel really safe, and like all of the precautions have been taken and they can just come and listen to something beautiful.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about how you've been able to provide music and what that's meant to both the artists and the audiences. And we talked just at the beginning of this interview about this return to normal that everyone seems to covet. What would the future look like in an ideal world for you?
An ideal world is a world in which music can have a voice in society. So of course this doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with an epidemic of this proportion, or a pandemic, I should say. I'm very optimistic about the future because I think that there is, I mean, fundamentally been a big mistake. At least since I've been around in this world, and the misunderstanding is that the arts are entertainment, not a priority, and as such, they are something that governments have to subsidize because they presumably recognize their value to our societies. I think this is absolutely untenable, unhospitable, and unsustainable. Uh, the governments have shown, I think, consistently that they don't care about the arts, and they would only sort of try and salvage them as a way of gaining that extra of votes in a very short-termist typical way. So the real problem that the arts have is that we need an audience. So we need to establish connections with people, with normal people. And very little has been done in this space because the main concern has always been that of trying to harness government support to make sure that we could continue, putting on our lush and expensive shows that would somehow continue to have a market incredibly self-referential, so talking always to the same people, on and on and on. And even as the population was waning, or was like sort of growing thinner, there hasn't been a concerted effort from artists or art organizations to fundamentally ask the question to ourselves: how are we going to talk to people? How are we going to make sure that we can communicate, right? So I'm very optimistic because this is an enormous opportunity, and as long as we have the goal in mind, and we don't sort of sidetrack or fall prey to, again, temporary misguided strategies. I think that there's an enormous opportunity for music to talk to many more people than it has ever done. We live in a most connected world. It's true that we live in a world that is where somehow art ends up competing with other forms of entertainment. Everything at our fingertips on smartphones, tablets, laptops, and so on. And therefore, proposing live performances of a certain standard and of a certain sort of cultural import is challenging because ways of attracting new audiences have to be developed and have to be discovered every day. But that's that's the nature. The nature of the art we're talking about is by itself risky, dangerous, difficult, can be frustrating. I mean, all these people like Beethoven, Schubert, Schumann, whatever, Chopin, I mean, they were not having an easy life. They never had an easy life. They always had to struggle to get their works published. They always had to struggle to get their art understood, to communicate. So we somehow have to be conscious that this legacy has got a weight to it, and is a weight that we want to sustain. Is a burden that we proudly bring on. But nothing has been done. So it's not like there have been attempts. I mean, where have these attempts been? Like, how effectively have they been measured? Or at least, I mean, maybe I'm too young, and I don't want to sound arrogant. Last of my sort of aims, but I think that actually what the music industry need is a little bit of humility and a little bit of understanding that you don't teach or you don't sort of preach uh, complex and beautiful art by
Yeah.
patronizing your audiences.
Or likewise by making them feel like they aren't quite able to understand um, on the other
Yes,
side of
yes,
that.
yeah.
Because I think I do feel that the industry is like that from very much the word go. When you start learning an instrument as a child, there can be a teacher pupil relationship, and the hierarchical nature of music can run all the way through a career, I think, and it's certainly an industry that's full of invisible sort of markers in which someone might feel that someone else is now a master of it, and the person in question might not feel that at all, or certainly wouldn't be able to clarify exactly what it was that had qualified them to become the master rather than the up and comer.
Yeah.
I certainly
that's
feel
true.
this when I organise chamber music in the north of England, and I think whenever we bring in new audience members, I'm always worried that they are greeted with a sort of disapproval almost. I mean, not that any individual within our audiences would disapprove of them specifically, but there's this sort of feeling of, this is our tradition, this is how we do things, new people, you're welcome as long as you magically understand the rules.
Yeah.
I think it's very risky. And obviously your cafe goes a very long way to dispelling that with the high quality music in a cafe environment with food and drink and all those things that I've always
Yes.
felt that music and food and drink are very important companions.
Well, at least historically, if we want to look
Yeah.
at tradition, if you want to be really traditional, that's where we should look.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Historically informed performance practice doesn't usually take into account the throwing of vegetables and gambling of previous times. So, what do you think the role of online music making is in the immediate future of classical? Well, when I say immediate, I mean, kind of through the rest of the pandemic and beyond, whatever that means.
I mean, the online music, it's a very controversial item, this one, because I think that it can potentially be very damaging, but at the same time it necessarily has a core value in it. So the core value is that online reaches more people, and therefore it can be used as a way of generating awareness, of stimulating interest, and so on. I mean, I always take as the most blatant example the digital concert hall that was started by the Berliner Philharmoniker, I think over 10 years ago now, around 2010, if I'm not wrong, because I remember I was one of the early subscribers back then, and I mean it's an incredible tool, because you can, from your living room, you can see all these wonderful archived concerts, from the 70s, from the 80s, from the 90s, and so on, as well as following on live events. The problem I see with the online is that this is twofold. One is that it goes nowhere near producing live connection going on between performers and audience in a room or in a concert hall. And people are so easily distracted by anything else that happens in their lives whilst they're supposedly paying attention or following a concert, which means that if you are in front of the TV and your phone goes off, maybe you pick it up and you go off the track. So your engagement is inevitably um, affected. And the second thing is that, of course, it devalues the effort of those involved in the performance, because nowadays you go on YouTube and you can virtually see anything that has happened in the last many years, 30 years maybe, with a growing curve as we approach nowadays in the present. So it means that the live performance is actually competing with history. Because in terms of time employed to watch the thing, you are implicitly comparing watching, an up-and-coming musician putting on a performance of Beethoven's Waldstein Sonata with an amazing recording by Claudio Rao from the late 70s, right? So why would you do that? And the question is maybe, well, because it's incredibly cheap, it's incredibly no frill, no fuss. I can just tune in, tune out as much as I want, and basically it's a non-committal kind of thing. So this, I think, is a potentially very demeaning thing to the performer, because of course when a performer works in a concert hall, people are there and they know that they paid a ticket, and hopefully that ticket was also expensive. We'll come back to this point in a while. And so they know that there's something valuable that they're supposed to be taking part of. There's a bias, basically. I mean, we operate constantly under bias, under the effect of biases for whatever we do. People who only drink white coffee may actually go for white coffee the moment they see that the cream on the surface is particularly nice, and then they try it once and they say, actually, I like this better. So it's choice nowadays is an incredibly it's a phenomenon incredibly prone to bias. So this is what I think about online. So I think we should continue to use the online channels to generate awareness and to spread interest for what we're doing. But at the same time, we should be conscious of the fact that the value itself of the music that is being proposed is very badly affected by the fact that the online audience is, by natural predisposition, less attentive and less tuned in somehow.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I agree very much. The conclusion I've come to, having thought about this a lot, is that it's another way of consuming music. So I don't have any concerns whatsoever about online music making there no longer be a need for live in-person music in a space, because I just think the two experiences are completely different. And they're not really comparable. Having initially been dismayed by how much free live music there was that artists had produced for nothing and were giving to people for nothing, I'm optimistic about its use, if done cleverly, in the sense that I think there is music that it's very difficult to hear in concert halls, such as new music, and I don't know, just the amount that you can consume if you listen to a lot of things online in the same way as you maybe do on the radio and so on. It's possible. I'm hopeful that this is a tool that we can use for our future audiences and for that development that you were talking about, because people will only come and buy an expensive concert ticket if they're fairly confident they're going to like what's in it. And we now have, online music making has improved exponentially over lockdown in many cases, and I'm hopeful that we can use that as as a tool for encouraging interest and encouraging understanding and feeling part of music,
Yeah.
but not as a replacement. And I just don't, I don't ever see there being a risk of it replacing live music, because live music is just a completely different animal altogether.
Yeah. No,
Do
I
you
agree.
agree?
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Yes. They shouldn't even be compared as a.
No, I don't think
Yeah.
so. And there's never, I mean, and in some ways, if anyone needed persuading of that, it's taken this lockdown, because I don't think anyone now would hesitate to say that coming to a place and listening to music is so much, you know,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
a desirable thing to do when you've been
Yeah.
deprived of it for so long. So, what is in the future for the Fidelio Cafe then? Obviously, restrictions allowing.
Well, I mean, we have. It's not too bad. I mean, we've had to postpone 23 concerts that we have scheduled for November, and they've all been postponed. So we will, things staying as they are, we will restart on the 4th of December. We got 16 concerts between the 4th and the 22nd of December. And then we have a short break, and we kick off again in January. And we got stuff planned out into June and July already. So it's a pretty solid sort of course of events that we have on. And again, you know, all the best musicians, but also we are creating space for emerging musicians. So in January, we have a project together with the Royal Academy of Music in London, where every Monday for 5 weeks in a row, I think, we're getting academy students to come here and perform, and it's a joint project with the Royal Academy, where, you know, the promotional efforts are going to be shared, and but somehow we continue to give you know, hope to young musicians that, you know, you are doing the right thing. You know, you should continue to invest in your musical upbringing and into your musical self, because there are people out there who value that and who want more of that.
Absolutely.
We're getting also, I mean, other musicians that may not be, you know, top flyers, but somehow, you know, are we're very happy to provide a platform for them to be involved, because I mean that all that segment of musicians in the middle, between the students and the top flyers, of course are the most affected at the moment, right? Because they're the ones that, for whom, you know, work is the most difficult to get.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very tricky when you're
Well, yeah,
no
because
longer
in
a
a
student,
situation where
but you're not quite at that. Yeah, that kind of.
if only the big halls are running, and the Fidelio Orchestra Cafe, there's no way. There's no way for all that segment of musicians to somehow, you know, get anything. So I think it's important to create. I mean, that was an exaggeration, of course. There are a lot of wonderful organizations that are trying to do as much as they can.
Well, there are, but also there are a lot of challenges. I mean, I work for several of these kinds of organisations, and it's very difficult because they're not always in receipt of funding. And they don't employ people, so they haven't been able to use things like furlough or any of the support, you know, at all. And they haven't, you know, it takes an awful lot of work, as you'll know, to produce a concert and put it on in any kind of restrictions. I mean, I put on this festival day in Tier 2 restrictions. Oh, I can't even tell you how long it took me just to do the risk assessment, you know, and to work out what was required, and as we've talked about before, what was what the safety measures were that I needed to do, and because some of the legislation feels a bit prohibitive until you look into it in more detail and decide actually. You know, having people on board to make those kind of judgment calls and to make those kind of arrangements isn't something that a lot of arts organisations have actually, unless they're the ones that are bigger, more well established, perhaps in receipt of funding. So I think there's a real challenge there. I could really see it being very difficult for one of the traditional music clubs, regional music clubs that are run by a team of volunteers, to get to grips with that. I can see that being really difficult. So you know, hopefully we can help them. Hopefully they can see these things happening, and we somehow make this expertise available to help this happen more across the board.
Well, we are of course also very much looking forward to bringing the orchestra back into functioning from the new year. We have a fantastic team of musicians involved in this, and I'm particularly looking forward to that, aside from the Orchestra Cafe, of course, because that's really, you know, a big project, right? Involving all this if you want, non-professional musicians that are fantastic, have got fantastic musical minds, and they're very successful in their professions, and somehow they really want to challenge themselves, but also the standard ways of seeing music as something that either you do or you don't do. I think it's really exciting to have all these people around, and of course the way in their interaction with proper professional musicians, of course, and the way the two things nurture each other.
Yeah, it's a really different and interesting combination, isn't it? To have that.
I mean, also for professionals, it's quite interesting to get to work with people who come from a different world, and they maybe they share a musical upbringing, but for one reason or another, now they work in a foreign office, or they're up in the bar, and so on.
Absolutely, there can be a lot of joy in music making for people where it's not a profession and it's a sort of a hobby, I suppose.
Yes, there can be a lot of joy, but apart from the joy, which of course is very romantic and we all appreciate that, I think it can be a lot of social value again. Yeah. Because it really gives music a role that goes beyond the fact that I am I'm slaving away in an office for 8 hours a day, but then I have fun doing what I love. I mean, that's okay, and it has got a value as well, of course. But I think the fact that people who are used to being great achievers in what they do recognize their possible contribution to sharing music with society, I think is an extra step, because all of a sudden it throws music into a space of really like social revolution, basically, and
absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree. It's very important, the ability to, and I think this may be what you were saying, or maybe slightly different, that people who are exceptional in a field to be spending their spare time effectively, or some of their spare time, making music and seeing the value of that and promoting the value of that has a social value.
It has, absolutely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, and have they met at all since the pandemic started, or is
we have, yes. Yeah, we have done little things. We've done a video recording back in the summer, and then we've done a couple of rehearsals that we had a concert scheduled for just the beginning of December. Unfortunately, it had to be cancelled because of the second lockdown. So
Well,
we don't
Here's to
lose
the new year
we don't lose
then,
hope.
and
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to
Katie,
me. It's
you're
been a
very
real
welcome.
pleasure.
And,
We will put into the show notes where you can find information about what's going on at the Fratello Cafe. It sounds like the place to go if you want music in December. Such a lot going on.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And,
Thank you for having me.
Keep well. Thank you so much for listening today. To find out what we're up to, do join our mailing list or follow us on social media. And if you'd like to support the podcast by buying me a coffee, you can do that on buymeacoffee.com. Thank you so much. See you next time.